So, welcome. And 2-day retreat, not too long, not too short, isn't that right? And the idea is, and I always like to start off with the idea of these kind of retreats, so now everyone is kind of on the same page. And the idea is really just to have a good time. That's really the idea behind these things. Yes, to enjoy ourselves, to relax a little bit, and maybe to find some joy, and ideally also to deepen one's understanding of the Buddhist teachings and what they are about. That's kind of the idea behind this. Is there anyone here who is not a Buddhist? Anyone who is anti-Buddhist? No? That's always scary. If you have an anti-Buddhist on the retreat, that's kind of the most that's scary. So everyone is roughly on the same track, which is great. And it was interesting. I just went for a little walk just before I came in here, just maybe half an hour or something. And I walked under the highway, the very noisy highway, got out on the other side. And on the other side is just forest. You get into the there's no houses almost at all over there. And kind of wild animals. There was an echidna I saw first, then I saw a few wallabies, then a wombat down the road, one after the other. It's kind of amazing. So you really have this feeling of wilderness. And of course, as a monk, you belong in the wilderness. You're kind of semi-wild yourself, so it kind of fits into the rest of everything. So it's kind of cool. So it feels really, feels like a good place, basically. So please enjoy yourself. Don't stress yourselves out. Don't try too hard to do anything. Don't try too hard to learn. Don't try too hard to meditate. Just enjoy the thing. And it's interesting, when you enjoy what you're doing, that's when you learn the most. You learn the most in terms of the content of the talk, so we're going to be discussing here. You also learn the most from your own experiences. You can actually evaluate your experience in a proper way when you are relaxed with it. And one of the worst things that we do, I think, in life is when we feel like we're doing the wrong thing. We're getting angry with something, or something else that we don't do right, and then we, as a consequence of that, we kind of suppress the anger, or we try to get rid of it, and we kind of get upset with ourselves. We get angry with the anger, right? It's not very. It's kind of getting things backward, isn't it, when you think about it? But when we do that, when we react emotionally in a negative way to things that we do wrong, maybe we don't keep the precepts or whatever it is, then actually just make it worse. Because the idea in Buddhism of insight, or of clear seeing, or of kind of learning from our mistakes, is that you have to have a balanced mind. You have to have a mind that is even. We have this idea of upekkha. We have ended with upekkha over here. So the idea of a balanced mind, because then you can actually have you introduced? Have they been introduced? You know this, yeah? Venerable upekkha, Venerable karunika, just in case. And when you have that balanced mind, and you can kind of look at your actions for what they are without judging yourself, then you can actually learn about yourself, and you can change yourself, and you can do something different for your life. But if you try to repress things and push them out of the way, pretend they don't exist or whatever, it's actually going to make it worse. So enjoying oneself, or at least being balanced, is very important on these kind of retreats, or even in daily life, or whatever you do, is always very useful. So that's kind of the bottom line. And it is surprising how many people in the world of spiritual practice don't really get that. They think the spiritual path is a path where you have to be tougher, and you have to sit with lots of pain, and you have to be hard on yourself and judge yourself and all of these kind of things. So it's a very common problem in the spiritual world. But actually, if spiritual practice doesn't enhance the quality of your life, then what's the point? I mean, why are you all here? Are you come here to torture yourself for the weekend, or have you come here to learn something useful? It's obvious you come here to learn something useful, maybe some life skills, a way of thinking about existence, a way of deepening your meditation practice, whatever it is. That's why you are here. That's why I'm here as well. I hope to learn something from this weekend as well. This is why we all do these things, and so we need to apply that in such a way that actually it starts with happiness from the very beginning. We're just discussing the other day, we were at Santi Monastery, where Venerable Karunika and Venerable upekkha are staying, and we were discussing the teaching of the Buddha and how the Buddha describes his own teaching. And this is a very interesting, what does the Buddha say about his own teaching? And one of the things that he says that it's Adi Kalyana, Majja Kalyana, Pariyosana Kalyana, which means it's good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good in the end. Yeah, that's one of the teachings. This is one of the ways it says the Dhamma should work. What does that mean? Well, it means that you're getting benefits in the beginning, getting benefits in the middle, and getting benefits in the end. You don't have to wait till after you die or anything like that. That's always a bit scary, isn't it, having to wait till after you die. So this is the idea of the spiritual practice. There should be benefits straight away. This doesn't mean that you indulge. This doesn't mean that you do things that are immoral or bad or hurtful to yourself or to other people. Sometimes there is a little bit of restraint, obviously, but you should be experiencing some of the benefits pretty much straight away. So this is kind of the idea behind this. But what I want to talk about, the title for today's talk is supposed to be Finding True Happiness, I think it was. And sounds attractive. And this is the sort of thing that from the very early on in my life, I was kind of obsessed with these kind of things. What is true happiness? What is the meaning of life? This is kind of thing that when I was a teenager in my early 20s, I always thought about what is the meaning of life? Because life seems like this strange thing. You come into this world, you're born into this life. You go to school, and maybe you go to university. Maybe then you get married to someone, or maybe you just live in a relationship or whatever. Maybe you have a family of some sort. You have a career in one way or another, and you do all of these things, and then eventually you become a pensioner, and then you live your final years, and then you die, and you think, why? What was this all about, right? It seems like this strange thing. We go through this process, and you wonder, what is it all about? There must be, isn't there something more than just going through this thing that everyone else goes through? Surely there must be something more to this. And so this is very fascinating. And of course, if you can get your head around the idea of the meaning of life, if you get some insight into that, what actually it is all about, then it becomes obviously a very profound guide for what we're supposed to do. If you think you have discovered the meaning of life, if you think you have some insight into that, then what else are you going to do? Are you going to say, oh yeah, who cares about the meaning of life? I'm going to do something else? Of course not. If you have some insight into the meaning of life, then you have a guide for the rest of your life on how you should live, what you should be doing. Right? That's kind of the point of having an insight into the meaning of life. You're not going to say, kind of wave that goodbye and do something which is not the meaning of life. That kind of would be crazy. So it is natural that when we start out in our life that we reflect, when we're young, reflect on these big questions, because that sets the agenda for what we're going to do with the rest of our life. Whether you're going to have a spiritual path or not, whether you're going to become a monk maybe, or a nun maybe, or not, and these kind of big questions in life. And so I was obsessed with these kind of things when I was young, and I was always reflecting on these things, and I don't know exactly why I reflect on these things. Maybe it was because I have been doing spiritual practices in the past, probably, quite likely. And so I was doing all kind of weird things. And one of the things that I suddenly remembered today, was something I haven't really remembered for years. I remember when I was at university and I was studying engineering. So I was a bit of a kind of nerd maybe at my university days. And I remember one of the things that when you are an engineer, so you do a lot of kind of mathematics and these kind of things, and then you're also interested in the meaning of life. So you combine engineering here with the meaning of life. How can you engineer the meaning of life, right? That's kind of what happens. This is what nerds do when they kind of go a bit overboard and have kind of all these weird ideas. And so what I did, I asked myself, well, how do we define happiness? How can we talk about happiness in a kind of scientific, nerdish, technological, engineering kind of way? So I had this idea that, to understand happiness, the idea is to maximize happiness. That kind of seems obvious, right? You have to maximize happiness somehow. So I drew this graph. I had this function. When you have a kind of graph, you have the x-axis and then you have the y-axis. And on the x-axis, I had time. So time starting at 0, and then it goes along the x-axis until you die over here. That's kind of the x-axis, That's kind of t, right? T starting at 0, going to, 80, or, if you're lucky, maybe even more. If you're unlucky, maybe only 50. So maybe I'm on overtime already because I'm beyond 50 already. So, So that is the x-axis, right? Is time. And on the y-axis, I had H for happiness. Yeah. So the idea then, I thought, was to have as high an H as possible over as much time as possible, right? So you want the H to be high all the way along. That was kind of my idea. And because I was an engineer, and because you learn these kind of weird things, the way to actually define that as a mathematical thing is an integral. So you have to kind of optimize the area under the curve, right? This is integration. And when you optimize the area under the curve, it means that you have a maximum H times the time you do it, and then that optimal area would then be the maximum, the sum of all the happiness over your entire lifetime. That was kind of my idea. I was really proud of that. I remember, wow, the happiness, the integral of the happiness function. That was really cool. And so I was probably more ego than actually spiritual practice. But anyway, it doesn't really matter. And but then I realized that actually, well, first of all, what do you think? Is that a reasonable way of thinking about happiness? Maximizing the area under the happiness function? Maybe. And I realized later on, actually, it wasn't really right. This is not actually this is not how life works. Because imagine that you start out in life and you grow up very happily, and things are really well. Maybe you have a very good, nice family who's very loving and caring, and you have you really have a really good life when you start out. But then something happens in your life, and the kind of happiness goes down. And then when you die, you are kind of much less happy, maybe even miserable when you die compared to when you started out. Now, even though the total, happiness, because it was so happy in the beginning, maybe even though the total happiness was good, still it is not good because you end up worse than where you started off. So actually, it is about. So that is not really the answer. And I realized later on that one of the most important things in human life, one of the things that really satisfies us as human beings, that's necessary for human beings to flourish, is that we have a sense of purpose, we have a sense of aim, a sense of goal, a sense that we're actually going somewhere. So if you are going down, it's almost like you're doing the opposite. You're going nowhere, you're going backwards. That's going to be quite difficult to take psychologically when you have a sense of going backwards like that. So one of the important things I realized actually is not so much about the total area under that blooming curve. That's maybe not so important. What matters is that actually you're going upwards. Because when you are going upwards, you have a feeling that you're moving towards something greater. You have a feeling that your life has a purpose, that your life has an aim. And that is really the idea of fulfilling the meaning of life. The idea of moving towards something better, something more fulfilling, a greater degree of satisfaction and contentment in your life, having less suffering, having less depression, less pain, and all of these kind of things. That is what life really is about. And so that was kind of an eye-opener. When you reflect on these things in life in a way like this, it kind of starts to become clear what it is that you have to do, how you have to live. But then, of course, then you have to find the right solution. How are we going to kind of increase and gradually have more happiness? And of course, when you start out in life, when you're young, then the most obvious thing is just to indulge in the kind of sensual pleasures of the world. When you're at university, at my days, university was crazy. It was just, so much partying, and so it was absolutely out of control, the kind of things that we're doing. This was back in the early 80s. And I hear these days people are really serious when they go to university. I didn't know what seriousness was when I was at university. It was really, really different. So lots of kind of sensual indulgence of all kinds. And that is kind of, what you started at. And it was interesting. I was speaking with Venerable Karunika yesterday. And I've known Venerable Karunika probably for a long, long time. I'm not going to say anything anything bad. But I've known, 20 years? Something like that? Almost 20 years, And every time I saw, before, I've known her before she became a nun, basically. And she would come to the monastery always dressed in white, and she seemed very holy from the very beginning. But which is wonderful, when you see that. But then yesterday we were talking about, well, how did we actually end up as monastics? How did we live before that? What is the transition that goes from, being an ordinary person who enjoys the sensual pleasures in the world to then becoming a monastic? And I realized she also had a life pretty much like me. Yeah, she was enjoying life and enjoying the world. And that's because of what everyone is like, you know. That's kind of the natural response to the world, that you want to enjoy yourself and these kind of things. And then you, of course, as you do that, as you enjoy all these so-called pleasures of the world, you start to realize that there is a certain hollowness there. It doesn't really satisfy. It doesn't really follow that graph going upwards. It's more like you're kind of going in this kind of up and down, this kind of curve, which kind of doesn't really lead anywhere. It's not very obvious that anything is happening to you. And there's a hollowness to those pleasures. And you enjoy yourself. The next day you might feel a bit depressed after all that kind of crazy drinking and partying and all that kind of stuff. And so it kind of became clear after a while that this doesn't actually work. And when you think about it, when you reflect about that kind of life, it is kind of obvious why it doesn't work. Because when you desire something, that desire comes from the inside. When you crave for happiness, you crave for the end of suffering, you crave for the problems in the world, it's actually a psychological lack that you have. Something is missing inside of you. It's like there's a hole that you need to fill up. There's something that is missing in your life. And then you go out into the world and you try to fill that gap with external things. And those external things are like band-aids. They kind of paper over that kind of feeling for a short while because you sort of immerse yourself in something else. You don't actually feel that feeling anymore. But as soon as that pleasure is gone, as soon as that relationship is over, as soon as that entertainment is finished, as soon as you come out of your drunken stupor after a party, it re-emerges. It comes back again. So the whole, the longing inside doesn't actually disappear merely by following this craving all the time. It doesn't actually get you anywhere. You just go round and round in this kind of eternal thing. And when you look at the vast majority of people in the world, that's exactly how they live their lives. Always trying to find fulfillment through the desires, through the craving. It seems obvious. I'm desiring something. Okay, if I get that, I'll be happy. It's a natural instinct. So there's nothing to be looked down upon. I mean, we all do these kind of things, of course. But when you reflect deeply, you realize it's never going to be satisfactory because you're trying to paper over. You're trying to sort out a psychological issue with something external, and obviously it is never actually going to work. And that is the problem. And then you start to think, well, maybe there is a different way of doing this. One of the ways that I like to think about craving, it's a very useful way of thinking about the idea of craving and why it never leads anywhere. It's a bit like smoking cigarettes. Has any of you here smoked cigarettes before? Yeah, you guys smoke cigarettes. Okay, good. So, I don't mean good. I mean, at least we have some experience over here, which is great. I have occasionally I've smoked cigarettes, but I was never addicted to cigarettes. But when you went to go to parties, you kind of, especially at university, you smoke cigars and all kind of crazy things. But anyway, that's kind of left behind. But if you get addicted to cigarettes, let's say it's one of the greatest cravings you can have. It's like on par with heroin and that kind of stuff. It's a very, very powerful craving. Did you ever have those cravings? Not really? Okay, good. So good on you. So you're on the right side. There's a very powerful craving here. But the weird thing about a cigarette, when you have it just every now and again, like I did, you're not addicted to it, it is actually very painful experience. You cough, it hurts your lungs when you have this kind of blooming cigarette. It's a very negative and very difficult experience. And you do it just to be cool, and you hang out with your mates, and you kind of, smoke some whatever. And then you, after a while, you get addicted to the nicotine. And then when you are addicted to the nicotine, even though the cigarette is exactly as painful as it was before, it is exactly as problematic as it was before, there's an immense satisfaction in having that cigarette. You feel really relieved. So what is going on there? And what is going on is that the relief is actually the relief from craving. That's really all it is. There's no pleasure in the cigarette in itself. It's just a relief from this terrible craving. So what you do is you are artificially inducing craving in yourself by getting addicted to cigarettes. And then you're overcoming that craving by having the cigarette, yeah? And you think it's something wonderful and nice. But actually, no, all you're doing is satisfying your craving. There's no real niceness apart from that. And the weird thing about sensual pleasures is that they are a large part of sensual pleasures are about overcoming the craving. Yeah, you are very hungry, you have a meal, and a large part of why the meal is so nice is because you are hungry, because you're craving. When you're full, the same meal doesn't look interesting anymore. Yeah, it's kind of whatever. I don't want to have anything to do with it. So a large part of that sensory or sensual existence in general is the idea of overcoming craving. There is very little pleasure inherent in the thing itself. And that is kind of really extraordinary. And I think this is why, in the on the spiritual path, one of the things that you overcome is all the kind of sexuality is kind of left behind. And it is said if you are a fully enlightened person, you are incapable of having any kind of sexual relationship. So and the reason is because a large part of that is the craving, is the drive, yeah? And once that craving is no longer there, it becomes meaningless. It doesn't have much meaning beyond that. That's kind of extraordinary when you think about it. You're overcoming pain. Yeah, this is what so much of sensuality is about. Getting rid of pain. Not much pleasure in the thing itself. And so then the question then arises, if these sensual pleasures are these kind of things that come and go, that the pleasure isn't all that great, a lot of it is just by overcoming the craving of existence, then what is the alternative? And this is where you start to come to the Buddhist path, and where the Buddhist path is very interesting, yeah, because that actually gives you that alternative. It shows you that there is a different kind of satisfaction, a different kind of fulfillment, that it doesn't have this kind of roller coaster effect of going up and down, but actually does satisfy you in a psychological way. And this is what this Buddhist path is about. And I always used, I think when I was contemplating the meaning of life in my early 20s or whatever, eventually you kind of give up. Yeah, you read a little bit of philosophy, you read about various kinds of spiritual traditions, and you kind of feel, nobody really figured it out. It's impossible. Yeah, the meaning of life, there's no such thing. Okay, I'm just going to indulge. End of story. That's kind of where you end up, right? Because no one seems to. People have been thinking about the meaning of life for thousands of years. You read about the ancient Vedas in India. You read about the ancient philosophers in the West, Socrates or whatever. Nobody could figure it out. So who am I to figure it out if no one else could figure it out? And then you give up, and then you kind of get into the ordinary life, yeah, like everyone else, because actually there is no solution to the meaning of life. So okay, whatever. And then, but actually. That is a mistake. Yeah? And the reason why very often we don't find that solution to the meaning of life is because we're looking very often in the wrong place. A lot of people, when they talk about the meaning of life, what they mean is some kind of external solution, yeah, a solution in the world. So when some of these modern religions, the New Age religions and these kind of things, and you ask them what that religion is about. It's about some kind of movement towards some kind of, humanity. Everyone loves each other, and we're all kind of happy together. And the kind of the omega point in the future, whatever, entering the age of Aquarius and this kind of stuff. And that is this idea that somehow we will create some kind of world where everything is just happy. No one invades Ukraine. Yeah, there is no climate change, there is no kind of pollution, there are no kind of, desperate migrants or desperate refugees who kind of, who want to be looked after around the world. We solve all these kind of problems, and then we're living like brothers and sisters around the world. But from the Buddha's point of view, that's not going to happen. Yeah, the world just isn't like that. Yes, we go through times when the world is more peaceful, but there is no such thing as a final solution to the problems of the world. There is no political system, final political system, that is going to create a stable society where everyone is going to be looked after and everything is going to be fine. We have been trying to discover these kind of political systems for centuries, millennia. Yeah, we have had kings and royals, we've had Marxism in the world, we have capitalism, we have libertarianism, and all these kind of things. And all of them kind of don't work out at the end of the day. They all are, there's something missing. And what is missing is that the human mind is such that it will always take advantage of any system that you build up. human craving, human desire, human greed is far stronger than any political system. As soon as you have a leader, and there's always going to have to be leaders, someone is going to have to lead these kind of revolutions and these kind of societies. And anyone in any kind of position of power, because they have defilements, they're going to take advantage of those systems. So any system is going to rot from within, and in the end, it's not going to work out. And this is what we always find. Yeah, we kind of in the West, we are proud of our democratic systems. And there's a lot to be said for democracy, but those systems too are unstable. Those systems too get taken advantage of. There are people in power who use those systems to their own, for their own advantage. And they don't even, I think they don't even necessarily mean to. This is an automatic thing. We just take advantage of whatever position we can in this world. So I'm not saying that we should not try to create a better world. Of course we should. Of course we should do our very best to, combat all the problems in the world and sort out, do what we can with environmental crisis and all these kind of things. But we should also realize while we do that, that there is no final solution in that realm. It just goes on. It carries on. New problems will arise. New issues will come, because this is the nature of the human heart, that we kind of take advantage of whatever situation is there. So then when you kind of see this, you start to turn in a different direction. And you turn for the meaning of life to more of a personal kind of practice instead of an external thing. Instead of looking for the meaning of life outside, in the world, creating a perfect society, you look inside of yourself. Can I find it within? And of course, the powerful thing is that if we can find some of that meaning within, if we can become more happy, more loving, more compassionate people personally, that has a ripple effect in society. If we want to be effective in creating a better world, the best thing is to sort our own lives out, yes? And then we become like a shining light for everyone else. People can see that we've got our act together, so other people will kind of take that as a sign that maybe this is the way to go. I don't know about you, but sometimes you meet people in the world that really inspire you. Yeah, people with kind of amazing qualities, and you think, wow, is that possible? I know that it was possible. If that's possible, that's what I want to do. I met some of those people. And I meet those people when when you travel around to Buddhist, it is not always even Buddhist countries. There are some people in the world that have very pure hearts, they're very beautiful people. And you think, wow, if that is possible, I want to do that. So we become beacons for other people when we act with kindness. And sometimes it doesn't take much. Sometimes it's just like one act of kindness. You say something nice to somebody, you give someone a hug, or you give someone maybe a gift. Oh, here's a cup of tea. Someone you've never given a cup of tea to, and think, wow, they give me a cup of tea, what's going on? And it's just so inspiring when that happens sometimes, when people treat you with kindness. I know there have been times in my life when people have been treating me with kindness. I thought, wow, you never expected, and it just comes out, and it's so heartwarming. It opens your life to other opportunities, other possibilities that otherwise you wouldn't know are there. And in the Buddhist suttas, and one of the reasons I bring this laptop everywhere, because I always want to have the suttas available, so I can quote the word of the Buddha just in case. So this is why I have it here. In the suttas, the Buddha says that just the sight of a Buddhist saint, like an arahant, an enlightened person, or someone who is practicing on the path, just that is of incredible benefit. And the reason why it is of incredible benefit is that you're seeing something, you're seeing a potential, you're seeing a possibility of what human beings can do, what is possible in human life. You're seeing the possibility of true kindness, true compassion, true care, true wisdom, and true peace. Someone who is always peaceful is extraordinarily inspiring when you see that. How is it possible to be peaceful in all situations? When somebody yells at you and someone is harsh towards you, and you just smile back and you say, oh, it's actually not my problem, it's your problem that you're yelling. That's great, right? When you can do that. And that's wonderful. And you see that possibility and you realize something is possible in the world. And if there aren't any enlightened people in the world, then of course you'd lose that possibility of seeing this potential that is there for human beings. So these things are very, very powerful. And this is what you start to get a glimpse of when you start reading the suttas. Start reading the word of the Buddha, this path of true happiness. And one of the first things that you recognize when you start reading the word of the Buddha is that the idea of happiness is everywhere. Yeah, it's absolutely everywhere. One of the the problems with Buddhism is that very often when we talk about the Buddha's teaching is that we talk about the Four Noble Truths. And the first Noble Truth is the Noble Truth of dukkha, suffering. Yeah, so people always, when they're kind of confronted with Buddhism, the first thing they hear is dukkha, suffering. Yeah. And they say, yeah, that's not for me. I want to go somewhere where you have some happiness. Yeah, this is just too negative. I don't want this this is not right. And so it's very important that we actually focus on the flip side of the dukkha. And of course, the point of Buddhism is that when you know about dukkha, when you know about suffering, you also know the other side of the coin. You know about happiness. And when you start to read the sutras, you see the opposite of dukkha is sukha. Sukha and dukkha. Yeah, sukha and dukkha. And so it's everywhere. Yeah, it's absolutely filled with the idea of sukha. And when you start to read this, you feel really inspired. You feel, wow, the Buddha is really, this is what he talks about. This is kind of his whole life, his whole teaching is about sukha. Okay, then maybe this is for me. And when the Buddha describes the Buddhist path, and the Buddhist path is described in great details in many places. It goes through kind of a sequence of things. It's very common. One of these sequences is called the gradual training. Yeah, the gradual kind of starting out as an ordinary human, ending up as someone who's fully enlightened. That's one way that it describes these things. Another way is the kind of the psychological evolution of meditation itself. That is also about kind of the stages you go through in meditation. And when you start to read these gradual trainings, or this gradual evolution of meditation practice, it is full of happiness. Yeah, everything is full of happiness. So the gradual training in Buddhism, it starts off like, right view, right? Right view is the idea that you are thinking about the world in the right way. So all of you here, you must have some degree of right view, I reckon, otherwise you wouldn't be here. If you had wrong view, you think, who wants to go on these kind of silly retreats? Yeah, it's like torture. Don't want to go there. I just want to kind of go to a nightclub or whatever. So that you're here is marvelous, wonderful. Already some degree of right view, on the right track. Yeah, otherwise you wouldn't be here. And then, of course, from that right view, then comes the idea, okay, we should live with a degree of morality in the world, a degree of kindness in the world. And then as soon as the Buddha has mentioned the idea of kindness, and he talks about that in great detail, and this is very interesting, how to talk about the idea of kindness, then he says the result of being kind is that you have what is called the anavajja sukha. Vajja means like you are at fault, yeah, you are to blame. So anavajja, ana is the negative form, so you have the happiness of being blameless. Yeah, it's the happiness of being blameless is that you feel good about yourself. You know that you're living a good life. You don't have to feel bad about things. So from the very beginning, just the idea of being kind in the world brings a degree of happiness. And I tell you, look at that. Notice the happiness that comes from living a blameless life. Because that is where the inspiration and motivation comes from, to practice further, right? When you see within yourself that actually, yes, I feel better about myself when I do these things. I don't keep breaking all these precepts all the time. You actually start to feel good within. And when you feel good within, what you are really doing is you're creating a refuge for yourself. The Buddha says in the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, in the long discourse of the Buddha, this is the last sutta of the Buddha. This is when I can't read the sutta of the Buddha at all. It's like the life story of the Buddha towards the very end, just before. You know this suttas? Yeah? Okay, excellent. I'm really glad people read the suttas. Like, that's really cool. So Mahaparinibbana is a story of the Buddha just before he's about to die, and it talks about all the kind of the important things before he is about to die, telling the Sangha, the monastic order, what to do, how to survive after him, telling the lay people, how to, all these kind of final issues. You can imagine when the greatest spiritual master of the world is about to die, there's a few issues to settle before he dies. That's kind of what life is usually like. So, and one of the things that he says in there is how to have a sense of refuge in your life. He can see that he is about to die, and you can imagine the trauma. Yeah, this is talk about PTSD, right? This is real trauma because now the Buddha is about to die. The Buddha has been the person who everyone is always going to. when I read the sutras, I feel a bit sorry for the Buddha, because every time there's a problem in the monastic community, oh, Buddha, please tell us, my toe is hurting, what should I do? It's 1 minute after 12. Can I eat my food 1 minute after 12, or do I have to end, at 12 exactly? And he had to answer every little question like that, right? So when I feel, I think being the Buddha sounds like a lot of dukkha, actually. But and so now this person, who has been this incredible influence for the whole Buddhist community for 45 years, since his awakening, he's going to pass away. And imagine the trauma. Imagine how difficult it is for the Buddhist community. I don't know who is your favorite teacher these days. I don't know if you probably know about Ajahn Brahmali. Do you know? Yeah, okay, you know about Ajahn Brahmali. I guess maybe Ajahn Brahmali. You probably enjoy Ajahn Brahmali. I think Ajahn Brahmali is great. I live with Ajahn Brahmali, right? So I'm really lucky. And Ajahn Brahmali is like, some people think he's just a joker, but actually Ajahn Brahmali is not just a joker. There's something very profound going on with Ajahn Brahmali. He's kind of a very special person. You can really only see that fully when you live with him. When you hear his talks given at the Maloka Center, he can tell one story after the other, and he tells a few jokes, and he says goodbye, and you think, oh yeah, whatever, and you go to the next teacher. But there's actually always Dhamma there, and I really recommend you, when you hear the stories of Ajahn Brahmali, reflect on those stories. Many of them are really profound, they're really deep, they carry a very important message, very many of those stories. So don't take it lightly. So, for me, it's like when Ajahn Brahmali dies, I'm a bit concerned about that myself, because I'm kind of fairly high in the monastic hierarchy. When he dies, maybe I will have to work harder. I don't really want to work harder. I kind of want to relax and chill. That's kind of my idea of the monastic life. But so I must admit, to me, it's a bit scary. And also, Ajahn Brahmali is very inspiring. We're just finishing the 3 months of the range at the Bodhinana Monastery. Every Wednesday, Ajahn Brahmali gives a Dhamma talk. And there's a power about someone like Ajahn Brahmali. When you sit in the presence of someone like Ajahn Brahmali, everything becomes peaceful. The peace is like tangible, right? It's not just peace, but it's a warmth, there's a compassion, and that compassion and kindness combined with peace, it's just extraordinarily tangible. So when you sit there, you kind of calm down, and you feel like you are in presence of something greater than normally you are in the presence of when you are with other people. That thing is kind of scary to lose. So imagine, so this is Ajahn Brahmali, right? But I'm talking about the Buddha. The Buddha is like, I don't know how many, I don't know about the multiplications here, 100 times Ajahn Brahmali, maybe, I don't know how many times it's possible to kind of make these comparisons. But imagine the Buddha. So of course, then the Buddha says, well, how are you going to live after I pass away? And then he tells them how to be their own refuge. That's what we're talking about now, right? How to be your own refuge. And he says two things. The Dhamma should be your refuge. Dhamma is the teaching of the Buddha. And the other thing, that it should be a refuge, you should be your own refuge. So you have to look after yourself. And being your own refuge, what does that mean? Well, I'm just saying that kindness, morality makes you happy. When you close your eyes and you feel good about yourself inside, you have a good feeling about yourself, you have a degree of self-worth and all of these kind of things, that is a refuge. Because you can close your eyes, leave the world outside, and you feel good within. Then you have a refuge from the world. And then you can take that further, because when you feel good within yourself, it means that you are less fearful of being by yourself, or being alone. In fact, you enjoy your own company. And when you enjoy your own company, that's when meditation becomes possible. And that is where the real refuge happens. Because the Buddha doesn't just say that you are your own refuge, Dhamma is your refuge. He says, how do you do that? Well, you do that by practicing the 4 satipatthanas. The four mindfulness meditations. That's Bhakti Sujato's translation. I can't use his translations. And that, of course, is things like mindfulness or breathing, right? The meditation practice in general. That is where you find that refuge from the world. You go within. You find peace within. You find happiness within. That is the real refuge. There are 2 qualities in meditation that you always see when the Buddha talks about meditation practice. And this is how you know that you're on the right track as far as meditation is concerned. Those 2 qualities are, on the one hand, peace. On the other hand, happiness, or joy. So you know that you're practicing well when you are becoming more peaceful and you're having more joy and happiness in your meditation. That's really how you know. Those are the 2 kind of hallmarks of meditation that tell you whether it is working or not. So that is how the Buddha talks about this idea of happiness. And there's something about that happiness of even just morality that you know is fulfilling in a completely different way than the happiness, the pursuit of sensual pleasures in the world. Whereas they are hollow. The happiness that comes from living well and to be kind, it fulfills you within in a completely different way. You feel complete. You feel that there's something, that hole inside of you, that emptiness inside of you, that is such a common experience in life when we just pursue sensual pleasures. That emptiness is no longer as strong as it was before. The hole within is starting to get filled. And that is kind of the feeling you have. So notice that in your life. Notice that this is happening. It becomes a very powerful source of motivation. And then the Buddha takes it further. He says then you practice this, and then the next thing you practice not just external morality, you practice inner morality as well. You treat people with kindness, you think kind thoughts, you have compassion for people, you forgive all the silliness that is happening in the world. When you see it's very easy to get angry when you look at the news too much. You see people doing bad things. But remember, people don't know what they're doing. People have no idea what's going on. When you see Russia invading Ukraine, and you see all those young soldiers being told to invade another country, they don't know what they're doing. Just being guided by some kind of larger force in their life. You feel sorry for those soldiers going in asked to kill other people. It's tragic. There's grounds for compassion rather than grounds for being angry. They don't know what they're doing. And in the end, no one knows what they're doing. People might think that Vladimir Putin should be held to account, and maybe he should be held to account, but still, he doesn't really know what he's doing either. He's also, in a sense, a victim of his own delusion, of his own lack of understanding, of his own stupidity, if you like. And then you are on the right track, but you don't really feel angry against anyone, but you have compassion for the whole world because you understand that we're all in this, what's the right word? We're all in this badness together, it is kind of bad. And then you're on the right track, and that's when you purify your mind. But you also see the goodness. It's important not to focus too much on the negative things and having compassion all the time, because compassion can very easily turn into negativity. You see all the hurt in the world. So see the goodness in the world. There's so much goodness in the world. There's so many people who try to live well, who do little good things in daily life. And that is also very, very powerful and beautiful. One of the things that I was always struck me is the paradoxical nature of happiness. And I remember when I was, this was also at university, when I was searching for truth, and I had a girlfriend at the time. It's a long time ago now. I have to admit, a long time ago. But this girlfriend, she gave me this book for my birthday. And this was called something like The Paradox of Happiness or something like that. And this fellow who had written this book, he had written it very soon after the Second World War. After the Second World War, was a massive devastation in Europe. And even though Norway, where I grew up, was a bit on the side of everything else, still, there was a lot of problems. People going to concentration camps and all this kind of stuff. And he said the weird thing was that during the Second World War, even though there was so much deprivation, there was no food. Difficult to get food. He had very little clothes because the international trade didn't work anymore. There was bombing. There was devastation going on. He said despite that, people were more happy than before. Or many people were more happy than before. Maybe not everyone, but many people were more happy. And he said the reason was because somehow when you had war going on, there was more compassion in society. People were looking out for each other. People were more caring. People were more sharing. People were more generous. And all these kind of things. And then he realized that actually these other qualities are far more important for your happiness than having all the external things right. Even not having enough food wasn't as important as having the qualities of compassion and kindness and care in your society. And it was interesting for me because when we had the war in Ukraine starting out, and I was reading some of the newspaper articles about the war in Ukraine, it was a similar story once again. Some of the people being interviewed said some of them were miserable, but someone saying, wow, actually, I don't dare to say this, but actually I feel quite happy. And we don't dare to say it because we think we're kind of letting everyone down by saying that we're happy when there's invasion. But it's a very interesting thing from a spiritual point of view. because it shows you what actually makes you happy in this world, what really matters. And sometimes, the strangest times, you feel happy. So never be too depressed about these wars, because we don't really know what's going on. Under the surface, many people may find happiness in the most difficult of times. So this is very useful to remember when there's war, because it's so easy to get down because of these things. But actually, maybe there is no reason for getting down. And so we purify our mind in this way. And then as you start to do this more and more, eventually your mind is really ready for meditation practice. And then when you come onto the meditation practice, again, the idea of happiness and contentment and deepening of peace is a very important part of this path of meditation. And one of my favorite suttas, I always say, I don't know why I say my favorite suttas, I like every sutta. Almost every sutta is great, not everyone, but the majority of suttas are. But there's one sutta which I always tend to read out when I do a meditation retreat. I'm not going to read it out here, but I'll tell you very briefly what it is about. And that is the psychological evolution of meditation. This is called the sutta is found in many, many places and many versions of it. And that's why it is a very important part of how the Buddhist development of the mind works. And in this sutta, the Buddha starts out with the idea of virtue, the idea of kindness. This is what I've been talking about now. This already gives a lot of happiness. It's a foundation for all meditation practice. This is one of the reasons I'm always a bit concerned about the mindfulness movement. I'm concerned they lose out on a lot of the Buddhist elements of Buddhist practice that are important to make meditation work. So it's good. It's good. It's not bad, of course, but it actually is not really enough to have a full spiritual life just to do mindfulness practice. But when you add sila, you add morality, you add kindness as the foundation for meditation, that's when it becomes very powerful. The Buddha starts out with sila. And then he says, from that sila, from that kindness, comes non-remorse. Abhipatisari, non-remorse is the Pali word for it. From non-remorse comes pamudja. Pamudja is like gladness. You feel glad. You feel good about yourself. From the gladness comes piti. Piti means like rapture. Rapture is like this blissful energies going through the body. This is how it often is experienced. From the rapture comes passaddhi. Passaddhi means tranquility. It means peace. From tranquility comes sukha. Sukha means happiness. Right? Okay, so pamudja, gladness, piti, rapture, passaddhi, tranquility or peace, sukha, happiness. It's kind of looking like pretty good deal, right? There's one happiness after the other. This is kind of the Buddhist path for you. One after the other. And from that happiness, the next one comes samadhi. Samadhi is like deep meditation on the Buddhist path. And of course, samadhi is going to be the most blissful experience you had in your entire life. You're going to be blown away by samadhi. That's kind of the point here. So one thing after the other, it is kind of the hallmark of Buddhism, is this idea of happiness. And the important point here is that you are becoming more and more peaceful, more and more tranquil as this is going on. And that tranquility you are experiencing is the opposite of craving, the opposite of desire. Desire is always restless. Desire is always agitated. Desire is making you move in the world. This is doing the exact opposite. We have been taught our whole life to pursue our dreams, to pursue our cravings, pursue our desires. Then we will be happy. And suddenly we discover that the exact opposite is true. It is the anti-desire, the anti-craving, the stillness, the peace, the sitting motionless for 10 hours at a time. That is the real happiness. For most people, that's torture, sitting motionless for 10 hours, right? But for a real meditator, that's the kind of the ultimate bliss, is to sit motionless for 10 hours. That is kind of extraordinary here. And you realize as you go through this kind of process of meditation that you are approaching the very thing that you were always looking for, the meaning of life. Why is that? Well, because the craving is always searching for a solution through desire. You're searching for some kind of result. You're searching for some kind of satisfaction, which craving never delivers. You just keep on going and going and going. And suddenly now, for the first time in your life, craving is disappearing. Craving is gone. And because craving is gone, there is no more movement. There's nothing more to be done. And that is why you're feeling this sense of complete satisfaction. And you are actually approaching the thing that you were looking for all along, but you were looking for in the wrong place. You are discovering the answer to the question of the meaning of life. That's kind of extraordinary. And the further you go along this path, the closer you are to approaching, coming to the idea of meaning of life. And one day, if you practice well, and this is here for the taking for every one of you, yeah? Yay! One day you do achieve a real state of samadhi. One day you do achieve this kind of blisses on the path that the Buddha is talking about. And when you achieve the bliss of samadhi, it feels like you have discovered the answer to that question. You have discovered the meaning of life itself. And the reason is because there is no desire anymore. There is no craving. There's nothing more to be done. You are 100% content, 100% blissed out with what you have now. There's nothing more to do. And that is the definition of being satisfied, of finding the solution to things. So this is the idea of finding happiness and contentment. We need to just look in a different direction from where we normally look. We're always looking in the wrong place. We're being driven by society. We're blind. We follow what everyone else does. We think that, everyone else does this, I better do it. My parents say, get married, and have children because we want grandchildren. So give us grandchildren or else, kind of thing, right? There's so much pressure for having children in this world. And it's kind of crazy. Why should people pressure us to have children? It's kind of madness. If you want to have children, great, do it well. But if you don't want to have children, wonderful. Why on earth should we have children for? Why should we feel compelled to have children? It's kind of crazy sometimes the way the world is. So we start to look for happiness. We become more independent. We don't just follow what other people say. We don't kind of take on the accepted wisdom, so-called wisdom of society. And if we are smart, we know that if we follow what everyone else does, we are going to be like everyone else. And everyone else isn't that great happy. We shouldn't be like everyone else, because that's we're going to end up like everyone else. We're going to go through the motions, do all the kind of things, end up eventually as a pensioner, and then wondering what all life, and then you lie on your deathbed, you think, whoa, what was that all about? And then you die, bang, that's it. Yeah, that's kind of crazy, isn't it? So be a bit rebellious. Read the word of the Buddha. Try to find out if the Buddha had a point. And I mean, many of you will know already that he had a point, obviously, that's why you are here. But understand this in a deep way, in a profound way, because when you understand this in a profound way, it becomes incredibly motivating. And then you are on the path, and you actually do find that this thing, which seems like it's always kind of like sand running through your fingers, this idea of the meaning of life, you realize that there actually is such a meaning. It is possible to find the answer to the meaning of life. And that is what is so extraordinary. Life does have a meaning. There is an end goal to this whole process. One of the words the Buddha uses for his own teaching is called sadatta. And sadatta means a true goal. Or saatta or sadatta. There is a true goal in Buddhism. There is a real end point. And that is precisely the thing about the meaning of life. So, enough talking, I think. So that is just a little bit about the idea of finding true happiness, and we're going to be developing this theme, I think, for the rest of this retreat. So let's stop there. Okay. Excellent. Very good. So we have another few minutes, but usually we kind of go for an hour for these talks. I'll only be speaking for 55 minutes. I'm kind of robbing you of 5 minutes here. But would anyone like to say anything or ask any questions at this point before we do some meditation together? Does anyone have anyone disagree with what I've said? Anyone become an anti-Buddhist after this talk? Yes, Lal, please.
Name of the sutta that you said you had your favorite?
It's in the. It actually occurs in many different places because there is a theme that kind of recurs. But one of the suttas that I like the best is called the Chaitanya Sutta. It's the Anguttara 10 is number 2. But it occurs in many guises, this particular sutta. It's one of those themes. And I think that's, to me, that's a very interesting point. What are the suttas that are really important? Yeah, this is actually a very kind of tricky thing to decide on, because very often we will hear things, kind of the received wisdom from past generations of Buddhism. This is the important sutta. Satipatthana Sutta, that is the real teaching. Yeah, it's the only teaching you have to read. Read that one, you're in business. That's kind of the received wisdom very often in Buddhism. But actually, it is not quite as simple as that. And the way to decide what really is the most important message of the Buddha is to see, well, what does he teach over and over? What does he teach to different people in different situations, in different cities, to the city folk, to the country people, to the kings, to the monks, to the nuns, to everyone there. That is how you decide what is really core Buddhist teachings. And when you know that, well, Satipatthana Sutta has only one sutta. Yeah, okay, some say it's twice, but I say it's once. But anyway, that's a different discussion. And that is how you decide. And this is why I say this particular sutta is very important, because this is a core teaching. Yeah. It is the same teaching as you find in the 7 factors of awakening, the Satta Sambhojjhanga. It's the same thing you find in the Anapanasati Sutta, very similarly. And so for that reason, it is, I consider it very significant. And I like that version of it, especially the Chaitanya Sutta. So check it out. And if you don't check it out, I might help you to find it. Okay, so good. So, Venerable Karunika, so what do we do next? Meditation? Yeah? Okay. Sure, yeah. So everything on this retreat is optional, right? Ajahn Brahmali, but one of the things I really like about Ajahn Brahmali is he used to say that everything on this retreat is optional except for 2 things. Breakfast and lunch. Everything else is optional. And that's kind of nice, yeah? That's kind of the compassion. This is kind of how Ajahn Brahmali likes to do things. So for me, it's the same. I have to follow my teacher, so it's the same on this retreat. But if you wish, you can stay for a bit of meditation. Let's do some meditation together. I think in the program it says under the stars. I think it's a little bit wet under the stars. So I think we better stay under the artificial light instead. So let's do a little bit of meditation together. Okay, everyone. So start off by sitting comfortably. This is the first mistake people do. They don't have enough comfort. The idea of meditation is for the body to disappear, right? If you indulge the body, it is bad because you're going to go to the indulgence. And if you have too much pain in the body, well, the body is going to be important because of the pain in the body. And we don't want the body to be important because meditation is about the mind. So get the body out of the way here. And then when you close your eyes, just start out by feeling the body, feeling that you are at ease, don't have any unnecessary pains anywhere, and also that you are relaxed. And if you're not really relaxed because you have a stressful job or whatever, then take whatever time you need to really relax, so you feel good within yourself. And just keep on relaxing. Don't worry too much about where your mind is at. Peace of mind comes gradually. Allow it to happen by itself. Don't force it in any way whatsoever. In fact, do the opposite. Allow the mind to be rebellious. Allow the mind to do whatever it wants. And then we will gradually pull it in line just by perceiving things in a wise way. Wisdom is the path to peace, not willpower. Wisdom power, not willpower. And just allow things to flow, allow the world to go by, allow your mind to do whatever it wants. No control, just sitting back, relaxing, just a little bit of awareness to see what's happening. And as you just enjoy sitting back and being peaceful within yourself, See if you can find some of that refuge within. The refuge where you just allow the world to go, knowing that the world ultimately is out of control. And instead you go to that peace within. And it doesn't really matter how many cars go by on the outside. Still there is possibility of finding that stillness inside. Go to that stillness within, that perception of peace, and find that refuge where you feel that you are in good company and you're living a worthwhile life, doing something beautiful for a weekend at least. Try to be really patient in your meditation practice. It's like a gradual awakening, a gradual coming into the present, a gradual abandoning of all the concerns of the world. So just allow the mind to settle very gradually. Allow the world to disappear into the background. Deepen that refuge in the practice. But be, above all, very patient with yourself. Okay, so that is a short meditation for you, just to start off the retreat. I'm going to retire now. Please feel free to continue if you like. There's no limits really, so please just carry on if you want to.